Well, I have the honor of having Susanne Kaiser on the program today, and she's one of my favorite people, and I really mean that. So, welcome to the Ad. Podcast, Susanna, and thank you so much for having this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor.
So we met, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago or something at QCon. I think that I was invited to speak in your track, which you had. Was it architectures or what? What do you remember what the track is?
Yeah, it was QCon San Francisco in 2018, I guess. I'm not really sure
Yeah.
about this. And I was track hosting the microservices track. And I was very delighted and very happy that you gave a talk there about domain-driven design on the microservices track that I hosted at that time.
And then I don't remember, I get a email or something like later in the evening, and it's you. We hadn't met in person, and you said, "Would you like to just talk a little bit?" And you had just arrived in San Francisco from a long flight, at least one flight from Germany, and I thought, "Wow, she must be so jet lagged," and still. I wasn't going to refuse the opportunity to meet you. And then we had such a great conversation, and it wasn't even that technical, right? It was more
That's
about
true.
dealing with sort of family challenges and aging parents. And that to me was so refreshing because it shows your empathy and your kindness and as a person. And that's just always impressed me so much. And this is why I want people to know you so much, because you're not just a techie.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, that's true. We were just diving right into non-technical, very important topics. And it was really like very, very personal from the very beginning. I remember it was really, really nice meeting you that time. Yes, I was a little bit tired, to be honest, but it was like, no, I won't miss it. I don't want to miss it at all. So I would like to get to know you earlier and before the conference hectic starts. And yeah, so that was really great. I really have very nice memories about that. Our first meeting in the lobby of the hotel
Yeah.
at QCon San Francisco.
So since then, we've stayed in touch. And in fact, I think I gave a talk or two at the microservice or micro exchange in Berlin. I think you organized that or helped organize it. And so we've stayed in touch. And then, of course, Addison Wesley Pearson Addison Wesley signs me for the signature series. And who is like the first on my list to contact about authoring a book? Well, Susanna was right up there. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But first of all, your sort of specialty now, what you have become well known for, is your combination of three tools/practices, if you will, or techniques, approaches to software development. And those are Wardley maps or Wardley mapping, domain-driven design, and team topologies. So can you give us a little background before we sort of dive into those topics a little more? Like what kind of drove you or convinced you that you needed to gather these kinds of tools and use them?
So yeah, it was kind of a journey. So it did not really came to me from the very first instance, because it was more like when I was starting, I guess 18 years ago, with when I graduated, when I was finished my computer sciences studies, I was really into the nitty-gritty details of software development and how to build software at that time. And it was really, really down to the detail itself. But the more experiences I gained along the journey, and the more problems I was encountering that customers were facing, the more and more I had, the perspectives became broader and broader in terms of like more in thinking of the system thinking approach or socio-technical systems, because I was thinking like the system thinking pioneers, they say that that system is more than the sum of its parts. It's the product of their interaction. And if you are usually initiatives that are focusing on improving separate parts of the system taken separately, they are not improving the performance of the whole. And since it's more important to have the systemic nature in mind in order to improve a system. So, and it was stepping from the very detailed perspective at the very beginning and becoming more and more broader perspective over the time. And then it was for me when I was it was more like when I entered the field of serverless technologies. I got in touch the first time. I was listening to a keynote from Simon Wardley, and he was talking about Wardley mapping. And Wardley mapping, that is a strategic framework invented by Simon Wardley, the researcher from the UK, and it is about to design and evolve effective business strategies based on situational awareness and movement following a strategy cycle. And the strategy cycle is the representation of change and how we need to react to it. And when I was first listening to his keynote back then, I guess it was also in 2018, I was sitting in the first row because I was also helping the organizers with this conference at that time in Hamburg. And I was sitting there like, what? It's so interesting what Simon Wardley is talking about, but how do I apply it to my specific use case? So how can I make it tangible to my situation? So that was the first encounter with Wardley mapping. And then I was also, when talking about serverless architecture, where you have really fine-grained functions, you can easily lose the broader perspective or lose the overview of it. And then I was thinking, why not applying it with domain-driven design, having a bounded context around a group of serverless functions where they are reflecting related behavior that shall stay consistent. So, and I was thinking, and then I was like, going through Simon Wardley's strategy cycle, where we have to apply doctrinal principles in order to prepare an organization for being amendable, to be adaptive for change. And I was thinking, domain-driven design supports part of these doctrinal principles. And then team topologies came along because it was more like business strategy and domain-driven design. So business strategy and software design, software architecture. And then I read the book about team topologies that was published end of 2019 by Matthew Skelton and Manuel Pais. And I was thinking, this perspective is missing in my approach because systems are not only consisting of technical or strategic parts, it's also consisting of teams. And it was kind of like a beautiful match of all these three perspectives in order to build adaptive systems that are in order to build such a system optimized for fast flow of change. So that it was not like right there from the very first second. Instead, it was evolving over the time.
Yeah, it's a great story about an account, of really using tools because of a need, right? Instead of just saying, wow, this looks interesting, I should, look into it just for the sake of the head knowledge, I guess, the sort of, just the pleasure of learning about it. Well, it is a pleasure to learn about things, but it's especially so when you can actually use them. So can you explain for the listeners just a little bit about Wardley mapping, or how to use Wardley maps?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, Wardley mapping suggests a strategy cycle. And this strategy cycle is composed of purpose, landscape, climate, and doctrine, and then leadership. And it's tries to put your organization to make you aware of your situational awareness in terms of like, where do you position your organization towards, or in respect to your competitors? What is your landscape? And this that you are operating in as an organization. And a Wardley map itself, so there's a difference between, or there's a distinguishing part between Wardley mapping, because it describes the entire strategy cycle. And Wardley map itself, it's a part of the strategy cycle that visualizes the landscape an organization is operating in. And it visualizes the evolution of a value chain. So Wardley map is composed of a y-axis and an x-axis. On the y-axis, you are plotting the value chain. So behind every user need, there's a value chain. It starts with identifying your users and what are the user needs, what components are necessary to fulfill these user needs, either directly or facilitating other components in this value chain. And you go from top to bottom, from visible to invisible. And at the top, you have those components where your users are interacting directly with your system. And further down, it gets less and less visible to your users. And it's the value to the user and the visibility, they are closely correlated. So, and then you use it after you've identified this value chain. So what is necessary to fulfill the user needs of our users? You are using these value chain that you have derived and plot these along the x-axis, which is describing the evolution stages. And the evolution stages go from left to right, from left genesis with brand new things that have never existed before, then custom built, then product and rental, such as off-the-shelf products and open source software, and then on the right, commodity and utilities. And and you are trying to figure out which component of your value chain is going to in which evolution stage. And so the evolution of a component is determined by its the movement of a component along the x-axis is determined by its stage of evolution. So, for example, if you look at power supply, I don't know when it was invented first. So it was in Genesis, and it was a huge, monstrous factory. And now it's commodity and utility. It's just a power outlet in every room that you have, right? So, and every component evolves, moves from left to right. Everything evolves. So everything is very, very dynamic and not static at all. And everything evolves through the forces of supply and demand competition. So, and sometimes I use this, for example, when I work with clients, sometimes I try to figure out, because every evolution state that you have, or components in every evolution stage, is that you have to apply some some principles in terms of, for example, use appropriate message per evolution stage. So, for example, components in Genesis and custom build, there you should focus on building them in-house, using preferably agile methods. Then components in product and rental mostly go then using off-the-shelf products, or also open source software, and using preferably lean methods. And then components in commodity and utility, that's where you can outsource to utility suppliers, or like using Six Sigma. And so it's also like makes you kind of like visualization of your value chain and where to kind of like make and buy decisions. And sometimes I see that customers or clients are building components in-house that's supposed to be in product and rental or commodity and utility, and it's not. And also there comes also domain-driven design into the field, because domain-driven design helps us to identify or to discover our core domain, right? So what is the part of our system, what bounded contexts, what subdomains are related to the part that we have to strategically invest in most, because they provide competitive advantage, our core domain. And these usually you can map these core domains then to Genesis and custom build, because that's the one that you have to build in-house. These are the part of the system that we have to strategically invest in most. And when I see components that's supposed to be in product and rental or commodity and utility, and you build them in-house, I usually ask them, why? Why are you building them in-house? Where is the competitive advantage that you would like to achieve? And if they say, oh, no, I don't have one, then I suggest to rethink it, because it does definitely, move your focus to other parts of the system that does not provide competitive advantage. And you would like to shift your focus back on those components that provide competitive advantage and where you have to strategically invest in most. So I don't know, have I answered your question, by the way? I guess I was talking and talking and talking.
Yes, very, very well, in fact. And I was gonna ask you about how Wardley Maps specifically fits in with domain-driven design, and as you said, naturally does. And then the context mapping, right, is good for understanding, okay, we still need this, even though it may not be strategic. It's either supporting or generic, but we can't build a system without these things. So how do we interact with those and integrate and things like that? So yeah.
And I also like to having the Wardley map in front, like placing the bounded context in the evolution stages, and then have the context map patterns applied to them, and to see, so because the bounded contexts that shift to the left side of the Wardley map, they tend to change often, they tend to be quite complex, and if we are conforming like on a bounded context that is more on product and rental on the right part of the Wardley map, and they are conforming to the left part, it visualizes it's a great tool to visualize that you are conforming to a constantly changing codomain, and so you should not conform to the left part of your Wardley map, because you have to constantly adjust it, and so it's really interesting to apply both, like both perspectives, having the Wardley map, placing your bounded context on the Wardley map, and then also placing the context maps on top of it, like to see, okay, it might be an unhealthy relationship in terms of that it introduces a lot of communication, coordination efforts to make this work, to make a supposedly stable component, a supposedly stable supporting or generic subdomain conforming to a core domain. It visualizes very, very well on the Wardley map.
Very good explanation and advice, or wisdom that you shared about not conforming to the core domain, and actually getting teams not to conform to everything is sometimes very difficult, because they don't recognize the potential disadvantages of doing that a lot. Well, more than potential, but in any way, now for team topologies, not that team topologies are necessarily last as least important, but it seems like you would definitely need to understand these levels of, genesis and build versus rental versus utility, these areas, before you actually assign teams or compose teams for this. What do you think about that?
Yeah, of course. So with team topologies, the third perspective that I like to bring in building adaptive systems fits very well together with Wardley mapping, or the Wardley map, and also with domain-driven design, because first of all, it's so there are some steps that how to apply, or some suggestions of how you can first introduce team topologies, and one, so that you can first, for example, identify a suitable stream of work. This could be the user needs. There could be activity-oriented or role-oriented, task-oriented stream of work. And a Wardley map itself with this user need are more like activity-oriented stream of work that we can first see, okay, this could be an activity that could be assigned to a stream-aligned team. And the bounded contexts that fulfill these user needs. That could be then the team boundary, can form the team boundary as an ownership boundary for streamlined teams. And streamlined teams, they are responsible, have end-to-end responsibility for stream of work, and in terms of like they are close to the customer, they're incorporating feedback, they are delivering changes, delivering features to the customers. And so there could be so domain-driven, the bounded context itself fulfilling user need, they could be ideal team boundaries for stream-aligned teams from team topologies. But if you have bounded context that sits like related to the core domain, they used to be supposed to be quite complex, change a lot, and you also have to mind the team's cognitive load. So the more bounded contexts on a Wardley map that are residing on the left part of your Wardley map, it gives you an indicator, okay, so that you have to be aware of that one team can handle less bounded contexts sitting on the left part of a Wardley map than bounded contexts that sit on the right part of a Wardley map, because the more they are residing on the right part, the more stable they are, the more mature they are, the less the fewer they change and the fewer complexities comes with them. And so this is then an indicator for streamlined teams taking care of bounded context sitting on the right, that they can handle more bounded context in the number and size and complexities, because it's easier to handle them than on the left part of the Wardley map. And then, so this is, and then you can also identify the services that these stream-aligned teams need in order to deliver their changes that support them in their delivery. And that's where platform teams come in. And platform teams can also be expressed on a Wardley map, because the value chain itself could be going from bounded context, and then you can have components like data storage components, search engine, message broker, and compute platform, virtual machines, storage, networking, and so on. And then where it goes like where it becomes less visible to the user now on the lower part, on the lower and more right part of the Wardley map, where then the platform team comes in, being responsible for these components of the Wardley map and supporting the stream-aligned teams with providing platform as a service, for example, where the stream-aligned teams can easily consume these services, for example, provisioning as platform, or also providing monitoring as a service, or a pipeline as a service, depending on what perspective they have.
When you walk into a new client, and by the way, you should engage with Susanne, because she obviously, as you can see, is a great advisor and strategist with these tools. But when you walk into a new client, you don't just like take out these 3 tools and say, okay, let's start. Where do you start? Are there other tools involved?
Yes, of course. So that's and it's not mutually exclusive. So if you use this tool, then you can't use that tool. They are all complementing each other. So I weave them in. So it's not like that I have to do everything with Wardley mapping first, and then we go into domain-driven design, and then we go into team topologies. Instead, it's gradually weaving in while I'm talking to the clients, and I like to visualize it together with the client. For example, right now, on a Miro board, for example. So, and I usually I have a starting point. It might vary from customer to customer, but usually I start, so what are from the client perspective, so what are your users your customers that you're providing a solution to, and what kind of user needs do they have? And what are the components that fulfill these user needs? So I'm starting with the value chain of a Wardley map, without explicitly expressing as a Wardley map, but it's my starting point, and then it's just evolving. It's like iteration, and then Because in order to understand this, the problem domain, I start from the user perspective first, and then that's where I think that is Wardley mapping, or the Wardley map itself, is really helpful. And then, for example, and to understand their business domain better, I come in with, for example, exploring their business domain using event storming or domain storytelling or user story mapping. It depends. It could be used exchangeably. So sometimes it's but I like it to have it visualized so that everyone are on the same page. And everyone has the same understanding, and everyone gains the same domain knowledge along the journey. And then I am trying to understand their domain better, and sometimes also bringing the tech and the business together with close collaboration between domain experts and the development teams. Because what I have experienced a lot is that they barely talk to each other. And so that's I'm trying to fill or to bridge the gap between business and tech. And then later on, and to discover the core domain. So where do you differentiate from your customers? What is your competitive edge? And then having the strategic focus, and then also to bring this, place it on the Wardley map so it's more Genesis or custom build. And then along that way, so and how are your teams are scoped right now, and if it's a functional silo team, so what is your try to derive with them the current problems that they have. For example, it takes too long, or software delivery performance is not very great, and trying to work on that, what kind of problems they have. So I split it usually in what is their business domain. So what are their what kind of problems they would like to solve for their customers, and then what kind of struggles do they have to achieve this, to increase their software delivery performance. And then we try to figure out, how does a change flow through your system? What is necessary? Who do you have to coordinate with? What kind of changes? So try to apply then context map patterns as well, in terms of model propagation. So if you change the domain model here, or we automatically have to change it in another bounded context. So, okay. And we have to coordinate with this team. And so it's not only model propagation from a technical perspective, but also from what bottlenecks are coming in, that what kind of change coupling level do you have between your bounded context. And this is very well visualized with the context maps pattern that we can apply to that one as well. And then going from there, what kind of teams are responsible for which bounded context, as status quo, and how to improve it, and having a vision or a goal in mind, and to discuss it with customer too, in order to reduce the bottlenecks, to reduce or to optimize their team's cognitive load, and also that it flows through the system, that a change itself can be absorbed gracefully through the entire organization, from the team structure, and also from the software architecture, from the software design, and also from the business perspective.
That's some really good suggestions there, and I have to say, just to call this out and highlight it, I think it's very wise not to name tools and technologies too far in advance, or maybe not even at all, until they're already using them. Yeah. And it's simple, but as soon as you say something like value chain, Wardley map, it's like deer in the headlights a lot of times, right? It's just people freeze. Oh, I don't know what that means now. This is going to be really difficult. But instead, you just simply introduce the way you do this is by asking questions and so forth, and you don't give it a name. And then maybe hours later you say, oh, by the way, that was value chain. And oh, you saw that little sort of diagram map thing that we drew here. that's a Wardley map, and it shows, where your areas of strategy and, what kinds of customers you have and who you're trying to please, and see how it all fits together. And they're like, yeah, I get it. Right.
Yeah.
So is that, you find that helpful?
Yeah, I find it, because sometimes when you just mention, let's use this method, it's so abstract to them, and they can't really tell, or they don't know what kind of benefit it comes out to them, but just demonstrating what benefit comes. So it's kind of like natural flow without introducing the method names, for example. And then also you can, then slightly go over to event storming. Okay, so what happens in your domain? So when we are trying to, let's focus on these user needs. When we try to fulfill it, so what's going to happen? So where does it start? Where, and what kind of events come in? And then introducing event storming gradually. And I guess it's sometimes too overwhelming. I guess it's an iterative approach, helped me in my context a lot, in order to, so I have to define like a goal. So what we'd like to achieve at the end, yes, but how we go there, it's kind of like flow that I'm following.
Yeah, and this is what I think fits very well with the sort of learning and progression stages through the term or the three words shuhari, which is generally associated with martial arts, but I am not into martial arts at all. But it's something that to me makes sense, because you've got this shu level, which is a pure learner. They, a newbie, if you will. And how do we teach them? Well, we teach them by rote, or whatever you want to call it. They have to learn the rules about how this works. The ha level is when you know this well enough to teach others what the rules are, and you can apply them independently on your own. But the real level that everybody should be striving for is the re level, where we just know what we need to do, or we need to find out what we need to do, and we do what we need to do at any given time, and we're not following a cookbook or steps. And to me, this is you proving that you are at that level where you just know what to do. And so, that's about as good as it gets as a software developer, in my estimation.
Yeah, that's true. So it's and also the fact so that you can combine them, and they are not mutually exclusive. But I always have an anchor, and this is the user and the user needs. So that's where I come back to Wardley map, or to a Wardley map itself. Because sometimes I encountered it as well when I started my career, that I was really down into the technical details, but at that time, I barely questioned myself, why am I doing this? So is it fulfilling any user need or something like that? Or and I guess to have this anchor, like focusing, knowing your users and focusing your user needs on their user needs is really helpful in this process, that you still have this anchor. Wherever you go, you have this anchor. And so this was quite helpful. And where you go then, what direction you are following, it's then go with the flow with the customers, what kind of problems they would like to face first, and where is their major pain points, and try to address this. And so it varies from project to project.
Yeah, and I think everybody kind of has to go through that stage, no matter what secular profession that they're involved in. But technology, the programmers have to go out and really learn this stuff and try to build good software. And then hopefully they learn later that they can put more emphasis in other areas. But the problem is that a lot of software developers, whether architect or engineer, they don't very often get to that point. They kind of get stuck in this mode of probably somewhere between shu and ha, and they just don't think about that kind of like broader perspective. And so you are, I think, a gifted and unusual software developer from the standpoint of you've advanced beyond this. And so I hope it's always been my hope since I've written books and trained and consulted and so forth, that I can help people reach that point. And I'm glad that you're contributing to that area of the industry as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I hope I can contribute, because it's just from my perspective, and like these are my views, and so someone else is experiencing something totally different. But what I have experienced over the time is that my perspective has broadened over the time, getting more from socio-technical systems, and not only technical systems but socio-technical systems, and then also system thinking approach involved in it, having more like, okay, what kind of side effect does it have? And it's kind of like journey that comes with, from my perspective, like if you are like, when I first started with very, very little experience, I was really happy to have a very tiny angle, a very tiny spectrum to cover. And so I like it really in the, like, when you like a very stable domain, because they are to gain some experiences, and the more experiences you gain, the more experimental you become, right? And then you are trying to explore more things, and your perspective is going to widen, or to become broader over the time. So, and for me, it was a kind of natural evolution.
I think I didn't tell you this yet, but I already interviewed Matthew and Manuel. And so they're actually going to be, by the way, to listeners, this is being recorded about the end of October 2021. But we did talk about you in there.
Oh, really?
And yes, and we all three agreed that we're big fans of yours. So and one of the topics
likewise.
And one of the topics that came up is that you'll be teaching through their, what is it, Team Topologies Academy or something like that. You'll have some video training on that.
Yes, so it's Matthew and Manuel, they are really supportive, and we also had some video calls in between, and so we are definitely having some collaboration, and they welcomed me to their Team Topologies network as well. And so it's really, it's really mutual support, as with you, Vaughn. Like, I really appreciate it a lot, so having such a supportive people in this industry. And so we are trying to figure out some cooperations, and trying to bring Team Topologies, domain-driven design, and Wardley mapping to distribute it to others as well, hopefully.
Yeah, it's excellent. And by the way, thinking of the word excellent, I've engaging more recent with clients, the kind of things that I see now are, there's a lot of center of excellence organizations within a company. There are these sort of, I would say, maybe not exactly team topologies, but sort of like a trend to make kind of mini companies or mini startups within well-established, billions of dollars per year companies, and where accountability is given, to individual smaller organizations to produce certain things. And I think that's a really good move to use. But I think that this kind of approach that you're using should be included in those kinds of practices and organizational structures within the organization. Do you see that as a highly potential, or a place for high potential for innovation and using these tools and in those ways?
Yeah, of course. Because I guess it gives you a clear picture, first of all, like where to strategically invest in most, where to innovate on, like knowing where you are coming in with a situational awareness with Wardley mapping. So where are you situated in your landscape, where you're operating in and competing in, and what are bringing in domain-driven design with also like discovering the core domain. What are the subdomains that are providing competitive advantage, and where to strategically invest in most, and also innovate on and explore most, and that where team topology comes in, also with streamlined teams, and that they can focus on delivering value to the customers, but they are relying on services that platform teams are providing, or enabling team helping them acquiring missing capabilities, and so on. So this is a kind of ecosystem that really works very well together to absorb changes gracefully, and also to deliver changes quickly, and having software delivery performance in mind, already built in, I would say, and with team topologies, with streamlined team, with cross-functional autonomous teams in place, where they can experiment, and also this also was small, long-lived teams where you have a high trust relationship within the team, where you can experiment, where you can fail, where you can explore new things. And I guess it's a great, from my perspective, it's a great ecosystem that foster a lot of aspects that are necessary to be innovative, and going from having high trust in organization, that team topology suggests to have small teams where you have these trust boundaries that are of 5 to 9 people, for example, where you have a really high trust relationship within your teams, and also to have like this end-to-end ownership, that you're owning, for example, a bounded context. And it's not a top-down hierarchy command line. Instead, it's kind of like gracefully absorbing, evolving in your organization, and having responsibilities, ownerships of the end-to-end flow. And this is something that really works well in order to foster innovation, I would say, and it's and working against like this hierarchy organized waterfall approaches and something like that.
Yeah, and when these large organizations are creating these sort of mini startups, what they call them, something like that, like a mini company kind of approach, and they have a mini CEO and a mini, this kind of organization. Those are relatively small compared to the whole company, maybe 100 to 200 people, something like that. But that's not a small team, right? And so when you're talking about center of excellence, which is trying to provide excellent approaches and tools and so forth to those kind of mini companies within the large organization, kind of driving this approach from that level, or introducing it. Don't want to sound like it's dogmatic or something, but in a positive way, drive these tools into these mini companies, but then help. We have to help those mini companies to set up the topologies within, so that they can properly innovate, and they don't lose track of what is actually core here, and what is supporting or generic, commodity versus rental versus innovation genesis. So I think that these efforts really deserve this kind of attention within those companies. And I think it sounds like you're agreeing, but I just wanted to be clear that it's not just introducing the ideas and then see if it happens. It's really with a focused effort on introducing these things and making sure that they're used effectively.
Yeah, and it's also so. For example, team topologies, as you and Manuel, they what they say that it's, for example, specifically with platform teams, that you are not forced to use this platform. For example, that they are mandating using that platform, and it's that you still have this flexibility using your own, but then you're responsible for it by yourself when you're streamlined teams, for example. But it's like not having having this developer experience in mind, that streamlined teams can consume the platform as a service very easily, and get support from enabling teams or from the platform teams themselves how to use it. And I guess when you have this center of excellence, it's more like, okay, like having it more on a abstract level, and but for example, with enabling teams on the other side in the organization, in these these small organizations within a larger organization, enabling team on the other hand, they help you in specific use case, like, okay, we build a new bounded context as a microservice. We need what is the best way to do testing, or how to build a CI/CD pipeline. They can make suggestions like how to build a CI/CD pipeline or something like that. And the Center of Excellence, they are more like, okay, today we'll learn about cloud native or something like that. So that's what I have experienced so far, that it's more like general knowledge, and in teams also very like going into the teams and having team tailored facilitating for that team, and that's their specific scenario, without impeding the flow of change. Because if, for example, if they streamline teams need them all the time whenever they deliver a new change, like, oh, enabling team, we need you, I guess this is an indicator that it's not really an enabling team anymore. It's part of the team in order to make it to deliver a change. So it's really like where do you, I guess everything is like Center of Excellence are great, but they have more like a different goal and a different perspective than, for example, enabling teams. And enabling teams could be also very helpful in your little organization as well. They could be part-time, they don't have to be full-time. And for example, the smaller your teams are, your organization is, you don't have enabling teams maybe at the very beginning, more a task force, probably a part-time task force that help other teams for specific problems or specific challenges, and they could then result later in a full-time enabling team. Yeah, so it's really, it's what I have encountered when startup culture or ecosystem is established in a larger organization, is the culture. I guess it's a really challenge to reapply to the larger organization, because it has a totally different culture usually. And
and the accountability part, that's real, because if you're now responsible very openly for this thing, you really can't assume that someone else is going to take care of this, or point your finger at some other organization, because no, this is really your responsibility. And I think when you've worked in very large companies, that is not really the case a lot of times. I mean, yes, someone will always kind of get the blame for something not succeeding, but at various levels, the accountability isn't really outstanding outstandingly apparent. So yeah, really important to get those things right then, the tools that we use and the approaches to the development. I just wanted to ask you now a little bit of question, or a few questions, I should say, about a book that I've heard you're writing. Well, I'm so happy that you said yes when I invited you to write a book, but I just want you to tell listeners, how easy is it to write a book?
Oh gosh. First of all, thank you for inviting me, being part of your signature series at Edison Westley. I'm feeling very, very honored. And with every sentence, no, with every word that I write, I more and more adore authors like you who have successfully published a book already. Like, I already adored them before and highly respected them, but now, like, with every word, it's so it's totally different if you have this idea in your mind and writing them down into sentences that everyone can understand it, or at least hopefully grasp the idea behind it. It's such a challenge for me. So for example, when you mentioned, yes, sometimes it takes a few months to write a book, like, oh gosh, for me, it takes a few months to write a page. No, it's not that bad, but it's really like, it's a really challenging process. But, and specifically, if I am sometimes stuck in some ideas, and I need time to iterate the ideas, and like, oh no, why did I? So it's really like evolving over time. So it's kind of like giving birth to a baby for me. It evolves all the time, and it's growing, but very, very slowly from my perspective. So it's really challenging for me.
I have to say, you've come up with a very challenging and ambitious goal of this kind of book that you're writing, because you're not just teaching people about Wardley maps and about DDD and about team topologies, like giving definitions, but you have a real world example of a company that goes through various stages of a lifetime. You've taken on a lot, and I can understand why it's such a challenge to write that book.
Yeah. So I have to describe the three concepts first, right? And it's each of them have already, it's their own book. And I try to connect the dots between them, but before I can connect the dots, I have to introduce it somehow to the reader, because I don't. It's just like, it should be a starting point for the reader to see what benefits these three perspectives will give you to build adaptive systems. And then from that point, they can dive into your book and into team topologies and Wardley mapping book from Simon Wardley. So it's like gives you kind of like entry point to these three perspectives, but it requires describing them first and then making it tangible through an example. And then evolving, creating an example. It's a fictitious example at the end, how to apply them, like the approaches that I described for my clients, weaving in the three perspectives over the time, and to build an adaptive system for a fast flow of change. So yeah, it's challenging. And so sometimes I try to research sometimes, and the thing is, it's not there yet because it has not been described before. So I have to, for me, it's kind of like not natural, but it's something for me makes total sense to combine them. So, but it's still sometimes in my head and in my mind, and sometimes I apply it to clients, but to write it on the book, it's a totally different situation because you have to write a story, and this is really challenging for me because I can't go back to already describe scenarios, because sometimes combining the dots, from my perspective, what I've read so far or researched so far, it's quite new.
As we say in our strategic monoliths of microservices, having pure invention where something really doesn't exist before is quite difficult to come up with. Even if we would say that Wardley Maps is a pure invention, okay, but what you're doing is innovating, right? You're innovating with very important pre-existing tools, but you are combining them in a unique way. This is difficult, right? Innovation is sometimes more difficult than the pure invention, in the sense that how do we take what already exists and make it more appealing to someone, right? So like Apple did not invent the music in your, 1,000 songs in your pocket or something like that. I mean, okay, maybe 1,000, but in other words, I was using Sony Walkman and such devices from the early 1980s, walking around with headphones, and like you said, our hearing isn't that great anymore from those kinds of devices. But anyway, but why did Walkman sort of just disappear off the planet? Well, because cassettes and, radio stations didn't tune in very well with them and so forth. And so, Apple comes up with this idea that is not actually really new, but there was innovation within it. So how do you actually put 1,000 songs in your pocket, so to speak? And how do you make it easy, simple to get those, and cost effective, to get all that music on there? And I think this is really the kind of thing that you're doing with this book. So it's brand new, and it should be difficult because it is a complex task that you've undertaken.
It's challenging, yes. But yeah, it's also, I learn a lot with this one as well. So it's not that I guess I would not have touched it so deeply, or if I would not have started this book and trying to also improves then also the work with my clients, because it gives, with researchers, it gives another perspective and how to make it tangible. And so I learn a lot while writing this book too. And hopefully others will learn something out of it too. That's my hope.
Yeah, I think authors and trainers usually learn more than, even if they can convey so much information, it's still impossible to take that tacit knowledge that we gain ourselves and turn it over to everyone, because it's all connected with, who our experiences in life and so forth. So, I'm really happy that you've been successful so far, and you will feel highly satisfied and rewarded when the book is done. And then when you see people benefiting from it, this is really the ultimate kind of author experience that you can have, when people say, you changed the way that I work. Some people have even told me, you've changed my life. I sort of don't like that, but I understand where they're coming from. And that's what you're going to do. You will have that level of impact on people's lives, because it makes their ability to earn and enjoy their work much better.
Let's see. Yeah, so it's really, I would say, because when so sometimes when people are approaching me, like from my workshops or from my talks so far, and giving really, really kind and nice feedback, I'm always like, surprised in a good way. But I guess if you're so much into this deep detail, you're so much into that one, that it's for you, dealing with it on a daily basis, for you is kind of like commodity, right? Even though it's, but it's for you, it is really, it's not something that is really prevalent the entire day. And but I guess for people that are joining this or learning this right now, maybe it's a totally different perspective. And sometimes I'm because you see so many things for granted or take so many things for granted where you are at right now, and sometimes miss the point where you already were on a learning path as well, right? And to come back to, yes, I started with this journey too. So of course, I was learning from your book, for example, when I was reading your book, I finally grasped the idea of domain-driven design. So you changed my life too, by the way, Vaughan. And it's really, for me sometimes really, I don't know, I can't express it in a feeling. I don't have a word for it. It's interesting to see the reactions. And of course, there will be some people that say, no, it's not helpful at all, but that's fine.
Always.
So yeah.
Always. We cannot avoid it. I mean, I'll just give you an example that just, it's like someone says about my red book, it's too wordy, right? Too many words. But then you write distilled, right? And interestingly, the very same person who said too many words wrote a review on distilled, not enough words. You just simply can't please them, right?
Yeah.
Well, would you ever think of reading this in distilled and then going to the red book to find out more if you need more, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, it's impossible to avoid those, and no one will ever understand the effort that you've gone through to even learn in the first place and be brave enough, to take the challenge and finish. So many people want to write a book. They tell me, oh, I want to write a book. First of all, most of them can't come up with a decent outline. Mm. Some won't even write the first chapter after it's approved. So you're just, gone way beyond what most people are capable of.
Yeah, it's a challenge. So it's like really understand people that are struggling because I totally can feel it. But yeah, it requires a lot of discipline. That's true. And but with great support from all of you, and also from the audience on social media right now. It's really nice to hear these stories that they're asking for when it's going to be published, and so it's really nice to hear. So this really motivates me a lot.
Well, it's been my pleasure to speak with you today, and I'm sure this will be one of the favorites of our podcast series. So thank you so much for agreeing to this and taking time. I know you're very busy and you've got a book to write besides everything else. So thank you for taking time. And I promise that if you will have time later, I want to make sure that we interview you after the book is completed and have a retrospective on that.
That would be great. So much. Thanks a lot for having me. And it was a great pleasure for me to be on your podcast.